Walt, it was another eventful week in the autonomy markets. Waymo increased its footprint in the Bay Area by 50%, and some evidence emerged that they might be getting ready to expand to SFO. Uber founder Travis Kalanick, he's back, and he's not mincing words. He took shots at Dar Karashaki. More evidence emerged in a Washington Post article that Zoox is continuing to be mismanaged, but most importantly, autonomy markets hit the road. We headed up to Ann Arbor and we visited with May Mobility, unfortunately on separate days, but we were both there. How was your trip? I missed you.
I miss you too. It's kind of funny that we were both there this week, but not together. I did have, when I was in Ann Arbor, some good barbecue at a place called Zingerman's. Did you get a chance to eat there?
I did. I had dinner with Ed Olson, the founder there, and he recommended the barbecue plate. He said, but you also get the fried chicken. So I had the barbecue plate and the fried chicken, and I got to tell you all, it was delicious.
What about the fried ribs? Did you try the fried ribs?
No.
No, they were very good. Maybe this should be a side podcast that we do where wherever we go, we're just going to specifically review barbecue food. Because I see people do random side podcasts now on a variety of topics. So maybe we can do something on barbecue.
We're going to be in Texas in 2 weeks, and it's the home of barbecue. Maybe we'll find a few spots to review, and we'll pull a Dave Portnoy. He has pizza, we have barbecue.
one rib, everyone knows the rules. So getting back to May Mobility, it was a good trip. I mean, we did a test ride. I saw the facilities, did a test ride. It was, well, how was your test ride?
Flawless. No driver in the car. It was completely flawless. And the MPD, the way that they make decisions worked really, really well. Very cautious vehicle. And I have to say, one of my big takeaways from the ride was the engineering quality and build of the vehicle was very, very solid.
Yeah, I was also impressed by their facilities and their plan to get to, with their close relationship with Toyota, which we'll get to in a little bit here. The ride was great. I mean, I will say that, over the years, whenever I visit companies, I've done things like this. And in wireless, we used to do this back in the 90s where we would put people in a car and say, hey, we just built a new wireless network. And the car would be engineered to go through areas where your cell coverage was obviously very strong. So nothing to take away from them. I think you're right. It could be a little bit more aggressive, but, impressive given how little money that they have invested relative to their peers to get to that point. I don't even care if that ride was relatively engineered. I was sitting in a car where there was no driver in it. You can see it behind me in terms of my screenshot. I always have good background for my screens. It was fully driver out, but obviously looking forward to when they launch in some markets to test it as like a real customer.
Atlanta's coming online. It was funny. So I asked Ed, I said, well, where are you going to run? And I said, this being Atlanta, you got to go to the Coca-Cola Museum. He goes, Grayson, I was there a few weeks ago, and yes, we're going to the Coca-Cola Museum. They're going to be launching in downtown Atlanta. Atlanta's emerging as a hub. It'll be interesting to see. And May, in that market, they're not doing their own app. They're running on Lyft.
Yeah, they are. So that's an interesting thing. Obviously, I don't know. It's probably going to be similar to what we're seeing in Austin right now, because I think the initial cars that they'll be able to allocate at that point in their life cycle is going to be fairly limited. So this whole debate we had last week in terms of having a separate tier, I think those companies, are probably willing to do that right now. But if you only have 5 cars, I don't know. It's unclear how that's going to really work right now with Lyft. But it's again limited. But I think it just underscores that there's other tech companies out there that are kind of moving forward. This is not just a Waymo type only market or even a Tesla only market. These companies may be a little bit behind, but there's a lot of large companies out there that need to come up with strategies, whether it's OEM or large tech, that need to have a solution. And I think what's unique in their case, aside from the fact that a lot of people don't really know about them, to be honest, like Lyft, I think totally botched the release by mashing them together with Mobileye. This should have been an announcement onto itself. Lyft should have played this up more. And like this, they have this, what appears to be a very good relationship with Toyota, which I think is unique to them. Well, not unique to them. Toyota does, let me pull back on that. Toyota obviously has other autonomy relationships, but I think relative to other smaller or startup type car autonomy companies to have that integration with an OEM and plans to integrate into Siennas in the future, I thought was impressive.
Good? No, Walt, you're wrong. They have a great relationship. Toyota's going to manufacture the initial vehicles in Michigan, and then when they get to a certain amount volume, they're going to be manufactured in Ohio, all made in America. The other key thing that I learned from the tour and meeting with Edwin is not just Toyota, they have a relationship with Toyota Financial Services to finance the fleet. That is a big, big difference where they can provide the financing there because they're not going to operate it. They're going to sell it to fleet operators, which goes back to your theory on REITs. But if you're going to that model and you're also bringing financing from a well-capitalized finance arm, that could be a competitive advantage.
Just to underscore this, I mean, again, Toyota does have other relationships in autonomy, but to have a roadmap where they are going to be making as many cars as they're going to make within the next couple of years, to me, is a much greater validation point than putting out a press release with Lyft or Uber. Why? Because Lyft and Uber need press releases to convince the market that autonomy is not going to kill them. Toyota doesn't necessarily need those releases. And there's actual dollars that they're backing up in terms of co-development in getting to the point where, you know, this technology is implemented into Siennas on the line in Indiana. Like, that's the ultimate like end game here. So I think, you know, regardless of what we thought about the ride and where they are, that's a pretty good vote of confidence for that company.
It's a very vote of confidence. And if this keeps growing, could Toyota buy them? Could Apple buy them? Could somebody else buy them because they have all the components here?
I mean, I think we'll get to that later. You know, this is an age-old debate. You know, do you share in the benefit? Like, is there another OEM that's going to come up? Like, what's next for May? I mean, Uber should clearly make an announcement. It's kind of weird that Lyft was first. And it's almost like, does Uber want to come out with an announcement where they're second to Lyft, where they're going to be second in the market? Because even though it may only be a handful of cars in Atlanta, I mean, that's going to be before Uber. But ultimately, like, you got to, I guess, swallow your pride on that one to a certain extent and just get an announcement. In this case, Uber I'm talking about, and get an announcement with this company, open up a new market, even if your implementation is not going to be until 26 and 27. So I would think that that's something that seems obvious. And then the question to you, Grayson, is, you know, given the integration with Toyota, it's not exclusive. How soon until maybe we see another OEM relationship with May?
I would say another OEM relationship the next 12 to 18 months. Announcement, not integration. I want to stress that, but an announcement. Because May is going to really ramp up. They have really big plans. And unlike Uber and Lyft for autonomy, May's not in the business of putting out press releases. They're in the business of selling vehicles and collecting software revenue. Another business was getting big and it keeps expanding, and they're not in the press release business, they're in the expansion business, is Waymo. Another expansion this week. They added 27 square miles to the Bay Area. That's a 50% foot increase. But Walt, I thought you said it was double. Did ChatGPT write your tweet on X? What happened?
Well, that's fair criticism. I totally botched that. But I was asking, I plugged in the towns, I plugged in the map, and AI was telling me that the coverage area, the new coverage area, was like 50 square miles. And you've now pulled up a release where apparently it's only 27 square miles. So I don't know, maybe the map that they showed is not truly the coverage and they're not going to be on the highways. Yes, I totally botched that. It was not a doubling. 50% still a nice increase for California. The other thing I noticed on the release was they're saying this is for residents only, which I think means that when I travel to California, since I don't yet own a home in Palo Alto or wherever in the valley, that I can't use this service. Am I reading that correctly?
You are reading that correctly, but when you put out a tweet that's done by ChatGPT, you have to go the old Ronald Reagan saying, trust but verify. Well, you forgot to verify that part.
I did verify onto Perplexity and a couple other things. I botched it, but how else am I supposed to calculate the square miles of that? I literally plugged the map in. Yes, that was a botch. Or maybe
I'll give you a pass.
What if the PR group in Waymo botched it and it actually is 50 square miles, at least what the map was?
Well, we saw a disappearing tweet last week. So yes, PR folks do make mistakes. So we're even. How's that? We're completely even there. I like the rollout. I like the residents only. Why would you want to buy a house in Palo Alto and pay California state income tax, which I paid for years? That's to each their own. And for you, good luck with that one.
My daughter wants to move there. That's why. But I hear you.
See? Walt the father. He's a good man and he's being a good dad. And he's going to take it in the shorts to be a good father. Well done. And enjoy your 55% plus tax every year.
I live in New York, Grayson. Did you forget that my tax rate is not exactly low, either in real estate taxes or income or otherwise?
Okay, so the only difference you're trading is horrible weather for good weather. Okay.
There you go.
So there you go. So it's a push. And then if Trump brings back the SALT deduction, which I don't think it is, you'll be able to deduct some of that. But I digress on that. So if you hop on the magical Waltmobile bus and you end up in Palo Alto, you become a resident and you will have access to Waymo in Silicon Valley because it's open for residents only. Really smart move by Waymo for a variety of reasons. One, it keeps the consistency of the product. They know that there's not enough vehicles. We've seen those photos coming out of Phoenix. They know that there's not enough vehicles to really truly scale the service. Opening it to residents, really good way to build trust. I like it. Which raises the question, why the heck did they not do this in Austin? Because there is no multi-threads, 100+ comments on Reddit complaining about the user experience, saying, oh, this is great. This is great. There's not the blowback they're getting in Austin. Why not do the same thing for Austin?
I mean, Austin, they had the Uber relationship as a result. So, and it's about the amount of cars, which I don't know. What do you think the number of cars is in Austin these days?
We've heard it's substantially less than 100, but we do not have an exact figure. We had a very great viewer and listener on X, and he's going to go try and find the depot and share photos with us, but we don't have those yet. But we know substantially less than 100. Substantially, let's cut it in half, 50. I'm going to go out on a limb. No data to back this up. This is an assumption. I'll say around 40 vehicles, maybe 30.
I mean, to me, the bigger question is not why they didn't restrict it to residents in Austin, they meaning Waymo or even Uber. But the bigger question for Waymo is, are there implementation issues in terms of, and I brought this up on the last couple of podcasts, all of those Jaguars that are sitting there waiting to get electronics put on them. Like, you still only have whatever, let's call it 800, maybe it's up to 1,000 now cars in California. I don't know what they may need. Clearly, if they're limiting it to residents, maybe it's another 100 cars to deal with the valley, 200 cars to deal with what they're doing in the valley. Like, what's going on? Like, who is in charge of, at Waymo, with, the process to get more cars outfitted and get these cars on the road? Why can't they get more cars on the road?
I've been thinking about this and speaking to individuals in the industry, and a common denominator keeps emerging. Actually, two common denominators. One, individuals are speculating that there might be a potential specialist technician shortage, where there's not enough technicians that understand how to assemble and build an autonomous vehicle. And the other thing that keeps bubbling up is the maintenance. Perhaps there's not enough individuals to maintain this, so you have to split the technician to retrofit the car and to maintain the car. That's just speculation that's bubbling. What do you think?
I think that sounds like absolute bullshit to me, because the whole process of the whole point of process management is you develop a process in order to not have to have skilled labor do it. And you and I both have been doing a lot of meetings recently in terms of understanding what that process looks like and how the car has to be calibrated. And there's a lot of automation that can be done there, and there's a lot of things that can be done to get to that point. And you are the oldest and biggest company in the space. Like, how long does it take you to get a process where you can scale these cars? Unless everything that every other company is telling us is bullshit, and that their plans to ramp volumes, companies that are far behind where Waymo is today, are not going to happen. And they're going to be facing these same issues that Waymo is today. Second point, like, these cars are still very expensive, like, in terms of what they're paying for Jags. The components, self-made, self-designed. Like, at what point do you have enough scale and enough kind of like, hey, our technology works, that you accelerate the move to the next step where you really partner with one of the car manufacturers, whether it's Hyundai or others, to crank out cheaper, but more importantly, just higher volume numbers of cars?
Perhaps Waymo's biding its time till the Hyundai vehicles start coming off the line. Perhaps you really do need the OEM at the end of the day to scale mass production.
So do you put all your eggs in the Hyundai basket, or do you should you be out there talking to more OEMs and having other options, other parallel paths to get more cars in the market? Because clearly there's demand. Do they not realize that there's demand for these services? The product works.
The product works. They realize there's demand. If I'm in Waymo's leadership shoes, I want a minimum 3 to 4, potentially 5 OEM deals to really ensure that I have the capacity to scale.
Okay, so that's our frustration. Rant over. Maybe this is the next announcement that Waymo has, that there is something else in the world. It seems like it's been a while, and maybe we've got some 2025 announcements of new vendors with tighter timelines and greater volumes that will further rattle the concern of our friends over at Uber and Lyft in terms of how quickly Waymo is intending to scale. Let's go back to the Silicon Valley expansion. We're getting closer to connecting San Fran. Yeah, we're there, and Valley is way down there. There's a lot of other markets. I think it's actually more interesting for those of you who haven't been kind of paying attention that Waymo's footprint in San Francisco is kind of going south. South? South, closer to they're really close to the airport. Could Waymo, be close to San Fran? I think you've got some information that you've been, checking out recently on this topic. The San Francisco airport and Waymo, what's the status?
Yes, if you look at it from a geographic standpoint, Walt the Navigator is correct. They are going south. They're in Daly City, and they're coming up from the south, going north. They're essentially going to squeeze the airport. If you're going to squeeze an orange, you're going to squeeze the airport. That's what they're going to do. And an SFO official confirmed to NBC Bay Area that the airport is indeed in discussion with Waymo about a process that would allow Waymo to map the airport roadways. And here's the kicker: with or without passengers, and driverless and not driverless. Once that mapping begins, Walt, we're one step closer to the great airport unlock, which then in theory, based on the way the roadways work, gets us to the great highway unlock. Could we potentially see the great highway unlock and the great airport unlock happen around the same time?
I mean, you can't have the airport without the highway. Period. End of story. You're not going to back road it from San Fran. And look, the squeeze thing I get, but the reality is, all they need to do is extend the San Francisco part of the footprint a little bit further, and the rides that you're going to have from the airport to San Francisco is big. I get it. Ideal experience when people land in SFO, they're going north and south. So ideally, you'd like to also extend the footprint so you can handle the entire region. But whatever. Maybe the point is it's going to take such a long period of time to deal with the airport that in that interim, the southern part of the valley that they've now just unlocked, it will creep up. And by the time they get done dealing with these officials at airports, then they'll be ready to do it. So this goes back to you. You've lived this world, in terms of dealing with the governments. This is kind of your area expertise. I think airports are incredibly slow. How long is it going to take? If we now have evidence that discussions have begun, how long is it going to take for them to get approved? And then when it does get approved, where do you think they're going to let them do pickups at the airport?
Let's do this. You have a new level-headed mayor in San Francisco. Mayor Breed is out. Very positive for Waymo there. It can go slow. It can go fast. That's politics. I'll give you a very conservative estimate. December 2025, January 2026. And that is a very, very conservative estimate. I am taking into account San Francisco politics, unions, activists, you name it, will all show up. So I'll give that very conservatively. Where are they going to pick you up? You and I both know. They're going to go to horrible land. That's what I call it, horrible land. Whoever had the cockamamie idea to put rideshare, lo and behold, so far away and prioritize taxis is an absolute idiot. It's a horrible user experience, and it hurts your economy. They're probably most likely going to put in where rideshare pickup is. Then, let's say we're going through rideshare pickup. We're going to fast forward here. We're next year, we're in San Francisco. What if, say, 20, 30, 40% of all those rides are going into Waymos? How does Uber and Lyft react?
Well, first of all, I don't think that's horrible land. So I'm going to push back on that. I don't mind walking. It's not like JFK used to be. It's not that bad.
No, JFK's still bad. Don't even start there. You hop on that stupid train. Horrible.
All right. It's not that. You could use a couple more steps. Everyone should get their 10,000 steps in. It's good for your health. I will note that Uber, if you get a black car service, you do not have to walk to that pickup. You can actually get a curbside pickup. But let me go back again and say, ask you, what's the relevance of the mayor? Who is the so to speak decider here? And then kind of the second question layer to that is, now that Duffy's is in place, how much influence can the federal government have on making sure that these tech companies are not treated poorly with whoever's making the decision to decide whether autonomous cars can be in airports and then where their pickups are going to be?
It's most likely going to be a combination of the airport commission, the county commission. The mayor comes from the Levi Strauss family, entrepreneurial background, very successful family, hopefully that Duffy, I would say, could have influence. I'm not saying he's going to push the influence. I think he has bigger issues to deal with right now, including Boeing. Let's just cut to the chase on that. But I do believe that economic pressure could work to really escalate this, because there is demand for Waymo at SFO. In December 2024, there were approximately 13,366 searches for SFO on the Waymo app. In addition, 718 people installed the app physically while at the airport. This is Waymo data. So if the airport plays politics, Waymo could push out a push notification to everybody that searched or installed the app. So-and-so wants to ban this technology here. Click here to voice your opinion. Waymo could run a political campaign that the airport could not back down from.
First of all, where did you get that data? I mean, this is obviously Waymo data. So the fact that you're getting it and it's getting released shows that they're trying to build the case to get the pressure to get themselves opened up for that market.
Waymo is getting really brilliant with economics, and a hat tip to the Waymo team on this, because this data came out in their 2025 tourism impact report. And this really is insightful to highlight for you. At Waymo's current scale in San Francisco, that's 300 vehicles, Waymo had a $39.66 million positive impact on the city. Add airport access, and that number grows well to, ready for this, $88.9 million economic impact. Individuals are going to San Francisco for tourism and conventions, and they want to ride in a Waymo. The days of the trolley car being a San Francisco treat is the Waymo vehicle. That's the San Francisco. That's why people are going there. It is an economic tourism engine.
So, I mean, again, this is a Waymo report with economists that are hired by Waymo. So clearly they're going to put their best foot forward in terms of the quote unquote impact to the economy. It just makes me think back on how Uber started as a company when there's existing interests there, which in Uber's case was the taxi and limousine commission, where people owned these medallions, including former mayor Michael Bloomberg. That creates challenges to getting things done. Uber is obviously a large company. There's also still taxis, I guess, to exist in a certain extent. So the way Travis, the founder of Uber, dealt with that is just basically broke laws, right? Break it and then ask for permission. Waymo doesn't seem like the type of company to take that approach. You know, is it with all these things that you said, we get the arguments. Those are the right arguments to be made. There's still a kind of a labor component to this. Although, let's be honest, like Uber, there's no unions at Uber. So like who's arguing? There's no unions for taxis, I don't think. So like there's no strong labor argument, but there's still vested interest in local politics that could hold this back. It is all of these stats that you just quoted from Waymo enough to unlock that airport within the time frame that you predicted, which is end of year?
Yes, a couple reasons. Looming recession, economic uncertainty with tariffs, rising credit card debt, rising auto delinquencies, the consumer's hurting. And we saw a report now, we saw from the airlines, United, Delta, American, Southwest. What happened? Domestic airline demand is crashing. Only 15% of Americans are now looking to plan a vacation this summer because of the economic uncertainty. While San Francisco's economy, a big chunk of it, runs on tourism. I know I'll get the pushback on tech, but a large part of their economy runs on tourism. They look at all the jobs. And San Francisco has not fully recovered from the pandemic in terms of hotel occupancy rate. Waymo is a gift to San Francisco that should be treasured because it drives economic growth.
I mean, every time I go to San Francisco, the hotel prices are through the roof. So I don't know where this lack of economic impact is in San Francisco. It's very expensive. But look, I agree with you. Like the decline in some of the airlines, that's more incremental and bad news for Uber and Lyft in terms of rides. Like if there's less passengers, there's less ride, which is another reason why they're going to try and hold on to the positioning that they have in those airports even more. So I don't know. It seems like a bigger challenge. So Grayson, I'm taking the over. I think you said it was conservative. I think it's going to take longer than you're saying for the airport, just because I'm frustrated with the state of politics in California and New York. If it's a local issue, let's also now look at LAX. And if they're working on San Francisco, and I'm wrong, and San Fran does come online, this year, how difficult do you think it's going to be, Waymo, to gain access to LAX, given the politics that exist in LA?
Today, hard, extremely hard, because of the current mayor, who's getting recalled. It's active there. Karen Bass, she's being recalled for her mismanagement of the Palisades fires. she vocally came out and she put letters to the California Public Utilities Commission for local control of Waymo. She wanted to take over Waymo and basically ban it in LA and have her do whatever she wanted with a vehicle, which goes back to LA's ridiculous autonomous vehicle practice back when LA DOT had a thing called the MDS, the Mobility Data Standard. There was a clause in the Mobility Data Standard that would allow LA DOT, and this is in public documents that you can FOIA or I can send them to you, that would allow LA DOT to reroute an autonomous vehicle if they feel that it wasn't in the right neighborhood and it wasn't built under the guise of equality. They didn't care about a business. They cared about politics. So very, very hard. But she's in the process of being recalled because only 19% of Los Angeles residents think that Mayor Bass did a good job responding to the Palisades fire, and 41% said she did an extremely, very poor job. And that's a UC Berkeley poll. It's not a conservative poll. And if she's recalled, most likely, if the city council votes to hold an election, which I want to state for the record, in the LA charter, they do not have to, Rick Caruso will be mayor. If he's mayor, Waymo has a very clear path there because he has to rebuild the Los Angeles economy.
So you think, in your mind, Rick Caruso, if put in there because of the disaster, whatever that they dealt with in terms of the fires, that has specific positive implications to Waymo and the airport and highways and whatever it is?
Yes, big time, because the economic impact, and this goes back to the Waymo data study. Right now, Waymo has a very small fleet in LA. We do not know the exact size. We know it's a small fleet. Had a $4.7 million economic impact. At the airport, that's $10.7 million economic impact. Combine that with San Francisco, now you got a $50 million statewide impact. Ramp it up over a year and a half, 2 years, you're at $200 million, $250 million impact. That's too small for the next governor of California to ignore the economic impact that Waymo's going to have on the state. At the end of the day, California's bankrupt, and they need people to want to visit there. They want people to vacation there and spend money. Well, one of the greatest ways to move people, in my opinion, is put them in a Waymo, let them experience it. Waymo is good for California's economy, and we have the data now to back it up.
I mean, I hear you. My concern is it's still California. And I think, is it a Bruce Springsteen song, New Boss, same as the old boss? So I'm just less optimistic to see all these things. By the way, I 100% agree with you, right? Because we are, presumably logical and, people in terms of how to approach this stuff. I don't know if logic necessarily always applies to the politicians that are in California.
It's a one-party state and one-party rule. There's no checks and balances in California. And you want to hope for the best. It's a great state. It's a beautiful state. You want to hope for the best, but I'm being optimistic, hoping for it. Am I going to bet on it? No. You're just hoping for the best.
This is why, going back, not to belabor this point, in terms of the impact that the administration can have. And yeah, you're talking about having higher priorities, but I think Secretary Duffy can, as I always like to say, walk and chew gum at the same time. The ability to, on maybe disparate items, impact what goes on at states for the economic benefit. I don't know, maybe there's an opportunity there for them to have some impact. And maybe part of the national framework is requiring states to open up these major transportation hubs to competition, which doesn't necessarily exist today.
Unleash growth. You can call the bill unleash growth. But if and when that happens, hypothetical, it's been widely reported that 15 to 20% of all Uber and Lyft rides either start at an airport and end at an airport. Could they come out and lobby against this potentially?
I mean, they should. And I've always said that, or I've said for a long time on this podcast, that the highway unlock and getting to the airports are some of the highest value rides that exist with Uber and Lyft. So it's not about necessarily getting every single thing that's covered, but if you're taking, that portion of the rides, that's clearly a risk. And, these are big enough companies and they have people in those positions that they should be doing what they can to restrict that competition. Yes, I think they will.
It ties into the whole, and Investors Business Daily did a headline called the Uber overhang. It really ties into that Uber overhang sentiment. Uber is out there trying to diversify. They put out a supplement of all their AV partners, and one of those partners was Wayve. Wayve's making some really big moves with their expansion into Stuttgart and recently released a new blog post. What do you think of Wayve?
Well, I don't know, but much about Wayve. I hope to spend more time with them. I kind of like the approach. I like the fact that post that they made included videos. Just once again, pointing that there's other companies that are out there that may not have been born out of this kind of Google family tree that are developing technology that can provide options for OEMs and maybe large tech companies over time.
That blog post had me put on my research hat. I went back to Grayson School. And when I go back to Grayson School, I go down a rabbit hole because there's one thing in life that I thoroughly enjoy is reading books. I love reading books. Years ago, 2008, Malcolm Gladwell puts out his famous book, Outliers. And in the book, Mr. Gladwell talked about it's 10,000 hours to master something. Mr. Gladwell made the example about the Beatles and various different things of mastering your craft. And as you and I know, that spawned all sorts of consultants that had to go master the craft 10,000 hours. That book came out 8 years before one of the most important scientific papers in history was ever published. That paper was Attention is All You Need, and it was published in 2017. That paper has gone on to change the world. That paper introduced the world to Tensor. What does that mean for our audience that might not be familiar? That's the GPT and ChatGPT, generally pre-trained data. That accelerated the development of ChatGPT, and one could make the argument outside of the corporate structure, which I'm not going to comment on, of ChatGPT OpenAI that led to the $1 billion investment from Microsoft. That paper was written inside of Google by Google researchers. They got frustrated. They published it. They jumped on it because OpenAI at that time, and still is, was in a huge battle with DeepMind. So we had a big technical breakthrough. We had 10,000 hours. Then we had the pre-trained data breakthrough eight years. And then an additional 8 years later, Alex Kendall and the brilliant team at Wayve came up with a 100-hour theory where the Wave's embodied AI can they can train it on 100 hours of data to go from a Ford Mach-E to a Jaguar I-Pace to, let's say, a Land Rover Defender. That changes the game. Truly, this technology, if you look at that's 8-year increments. That's moving 16 years. We had all these big breakthroughs. If this holds with Wayve, is this their ChatGPT moment?
I mean, first of all, what you described is fascinating. Thank you for educating. I never had made those connections. I will say that I have no interest in reading a Malcolm Gladwell book, but Attention is All You Need. I will take a look at. And I think that provides a great framework, again, for there are different approaches in the market. And we hear this not only from Wayve, but from other companies, Let's take May Mobility that we just talked to that has not had the resources that Waymo has had to develop their technology. And yes, 100%, I believe that AI and technology in general can develop at a faster pace than it has historically. And we need people like Alex Kendall who are taking this approach. And frankly, like even this, I think relates back to Tesla. And a lot of the haters and the doubters are saying that they're never going to get there because they're used to hearing one approach that has taken 15 or 20 years to get there, that people need to be open to how technology can advance things, especially something as dramatic as we've seen with AI in recent years. So yes, I think that this could be, as you call it, the ChatGPT moment.
Do you want to know another interesting piece of data from Wayve? When they came to America, it only took 500 hours of incremental driving data in America in 8 weeks to train the vehicle to successfully drive in America. That's scalable. That's truly, truly scalable.
It is scalable, and I think that's exciting. I don't know. I hate to do a non sequitur here, but there was an MIT report that came out that said from Wabi that was claiming, did we cover that on last week's podcast, that you can use simulations to train the data? Does this belief in technology extend to Wabi's ability to train their driving based on simulations as opposed to actual driving hours?
You can't replicate the road. You need real world driving data. Things that you see on the road, things that you might never thought of. You need real world driving data. Every autonomous driving company, with the exception of Wabi, says that you need real world driving data. I'm in the camp where you need real world driving data. I will say, simulation plays a very, very important role, and the best company out there is Applied Intuition for simulation, but you do need real world driving data. That's what you need. Applied Intuition, they haven't made mistakes. They keep going. The information's reporting that they're raising it at a $15 billion valuation. Their business is humming. Amazon has an autonomous driving company called Zoox. Their business is not humming. We had a report in the Washington Post around several NHTSA violations, and NHTSA is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. One of the things that stood out to me in that report, the Zoox vehicle didn't have automotive glass. It just seems that what's going on at Zoox? Automotive glass is not hard to fix, Walt. You and I are not computer scientists, but we know 1 + 1 = 2. It's not 1 + 1 = 3. You and I are smart enough for that. What do you think is going on inside of Zoox, and does Amazon have to make a change?
Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, I thought that maybe should be our unforced error of the week. They have thousands of people that work there. Normally I would say fire the guy that put the wrong glass in there, but maybe it's 20 or 30 guys that's going on there. It seems kind of frustrating. I mean, is it possible that they just pull the plug on this? I mean, I think they still probably want to be in the area. Maybe they buy something, or maybe they keep Zoox, buy something else, and then whoever they buy, it's like an acqui-hire, and they come in and clean house at Zoox. There's no sense of urgency, and I don't know. It's troubling.
It's troubling, and this is public data. I want to state this is public data. Zoox management team is comprised of old Intel leadership. This just looks like Intel's repeating itself, but instead of doing it with chips, they're doing it with autonomous driving. And that's scary. And if I'm Amazon, I got to make a move. I got to make a change. Amazon has the capacity, they have the free cash flow to make large outsized investments. They have $8 billion in Anthropic. They use that investment to revamp Alexa Plus, powered by Anthropic. Guess what? It's no longer the laughing stock of the house anymore. It's actually really good from what we've seen from the demos. Amazon's correcting that mistake. I believe they have to correct that mistake with Zoox. With their AI approach, do they possibly go out and buy a Wayve, buy a Wabi, buy a Neuro? Do they go in that direction, or do they just close Zoox down and start all over again?
I mean, I think it's more consistent with their, approach to leverage Anthropic. To your point, Amazon leveraged Anthropic to improve Alexa. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if Zoox even speaks to the role that AI plays, in their process of getting their cars. Maybe they do, but like maybe they just need better PR, or just frankly, just better products. There is a company who's even worse off than any of these companies in AI, and it's Apple. And they have nothing to lean on in terms of that company. Their growth already faces headwinds. I was shocked. Verizon this week and AT&T talked about the fact that people, believe it or not, are holding on to their phones even longer. I mean, this has been a decade-long cycle, and the replacement cycle isn't accelerating. Plus, there's been more confirmation. The fanboys have finally realized that, maybe Siri is not going to improve this year. There's not going to be that great of a phone this year. I'm seeing like Mark Gurman from Bloomberg, who's been on this from the start, talking about 2027 for when they have products that fix. So look, when companies are facing, and your fanboys are calling for management change, when you face this existential threat, you start to do acquisitions. On the Lightshed podcast, we talked about maybe Disney or Netflix and those types of acquisitions, to try and stimulate growth. Yes, I know Apple hasn't done anything, large other than Beats, which they spent $4 billion, which was effectively an acqui-hire at the time. But they don't face the type of threat that they face now going forward in terms of growth. Does Apple, Grayson, need to buy into autonomy?
Yes, Apple needs growth. Their AI is horrible. I asked Siri a very simple question today. What is the time difference from East Coast to London? And what is that time now? I don't understand. I can't do that. Would you like me to open ChatGPT? That is a simple request. It's horrible. It's unusable. Apple Home doesn't work anymore. The whole system is junk at the end of the day. And Mark Gurman was right, and he called it right. Unlike some analysts, Tim Cook is the king. Tim Cook's this. Yes, Apple spits off a lot of cash, but I got news for you. The ecosystem it could be broken up at some point. Somebody can come out with an AI phone and penetrate it. And as you said, and you look at Apple's quarterly reports, Apple needs a growth engine. Yes, they shut down Project Titan. They're trying to build it in-house. Does Apple just say, we made a mistake and start over and buy a company? Yes, they got to do something. They really, truly have to do something. And autonomy potentially is the way there because that market is so large. And when Apple tries to build stuff in-house, not everything works right. Siri's not working right. I know that was an acquisition, but they haven't been able to build it. The Vision Pro has been a dud to say the least. Apple needs growth. Whether it's autonomy or something, I don't know, but I truly do know that they need growth.
Well, you're preaching to the choir. I've been talking about this for a year. And frankly, from a rating standpoint, it was frustrating that the stock outperformed based on promises that were made at WWDC, which now seem to be not only empty promises, but then you have to wonder what management knew about their own AI when they were promising what AI was going to deliver and even advertising about it. But whatever, that is a different thing. If you want to learn more about that, join the Lightshed family and we can talk about that. Let's move on to Travis Kalanick, founder of Uber. I know you claim there's someone else that was there before him, whatever. Travis was the guy. We talked about him earlier in the podcast. At a conference in LA, he said it was a mistake for Uber to sell their autonomous driving division to Aurora. Looking back, do you think that was the right move? Yes or no? And then I'll give you my thought.
100% it was the right move.
I mean, from my standpoint, yes and no. Like when they were doing that, I was actually against what Dara was doing. I'm like, oh, this guy is too conservative. Like he's just responding to investors because Uber was all over the place and, Uber Elevate with autonomous air vehicles and everything else. And I thought they needed to bring John Ledger in to change the brand and get them the employee base energized. But look, he was doing what investors wanted to see. He got the company to positive free cash flow. They're in a much stronger position now than they were before. And the reality is there's no clear indication that where Uber was going at the time would have been, much further along, given that they wouldn't have been able to invest those resources in. The investors wanted to see free cash flow. They didn't want to see more spending. So that kind of alternate universe, as Disney would call it, the, whatever their word is for it, I don't think exists the way Travis dreamt it should exist. So I think that was ultimately probably the right decision, but you should have kept something a little bit more on the development, I think, on autonomy, because now it's kind of coming back to haunt you, and it really is your ultimate existential threat to the life of that company over the next 5 to 10 years.
Dara and the team at Uber had to make decisions, okay? You're a numbers guy, Walt. HEG that's Uber's autonomous driving group, spent nearly $3 billion from 2015 to 2020, with annual losses exceeding $300 million by 2020. Pandemic hit, Uber's ride-hailing revenue dropped by 75% in Q2 2020. They also had the unfortunate March 18th, 2018, Elaine Herzberg crash that led to her unfortunate untimely death in an XC90 because of shortcuts that were taken. We had the Google lawsuit. Bottom line is the program had to be cleaned up and it had to be shut down. Fast forward to today, I can make a very argument that Uber should make an acquisition and potentially ramp up a program.
Yeah, I think all of those things, a lot of them Travis directly had responsibility for, on multiple of those things that you mentioned. And secondly, there just wasn't money. Like, where was the money going to come from to advance it to the point where it would have been competitive for Waymo? So I think we're kind of in agreement with this. Sorry, Travis, I give you a lot of credit for getting Uber off the ground, but that's probably an unfair knock on existing management.
Mr. Karashaki had a decision to make, and he made that decision. Individuals make all sorts of decisions, Walt, which brings me to my favorite part of the podcast, the unforced error. And I got a whoopee for you this week. There's a trend, Walt, according to the San Francisco Examiner, that individuals are going around San Francisco and having sex in the back of Waymos. The unforced error part of that, Walt, is they're potentially being watched by somebody at Waymo. They're not streaming it on OnlyFans and getting paid. If you're going to have sex and get watched, you should get paid for it. That's the unforced error. Have sex, get watched, get paid. You're not doing it. That's the error.
Well, thank you for that color on the unforced error. It's probably something I prefer not to think about the next time I want to get into a Waymo, what may have occurred before I was there. But that's a good one. I'm going to say my unforced error is the Zoox having the wrong glass in their cars. Go back to that. That was crazy.
It was crazy. Crazy thing happens in the world of autonomy. We're going to be here each and every week to document and cover the world of autonomy. Well, what do we need to look for in the autonomy markets over the coming week?
I don't think there's really anything on the docket, but the industry has certainly provided a very steady flow of new information. Who knows? Maybe Waymo announces a new car, a new OEM partnership. I'd love to see that. I think my week is going to be spent getting ready for our trip to Texas, specifically for the Forward Fort Worth, as everyone knows, not far outside of Dallas. So there's a lot of autonomous operations there. If I haven't talked to you already and you're in the Dallas area and you want to chat autonomy or have something to show, let me know. Hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter. So definitely looking forward to spending time out there. Both of us. Once again, Autonomy Markets hit the room. This time we're going to be together. Maybe we'll send out selfies eating some barbecue together.
I think you've got a deal, and I'll be colorful as other. Perhaps Walt will get dressed up like a cowboy, and we call him Cowboy Walt. You're going to have to tune in a few weeks to see that and follow us on X, because the future is bright, the future is autonomous, the future is Autonomy Markets. Walt, until next week.